I hope you can hear me okay. If you just want to type into the chat box that you can, that would be appreciated. So this afternoon I'm just going to run through about shared parental leave and give you some guidance on that hopefully. As a starting point, what I would say is it'd be a good idea, if you haven't done already, to download the ACAS guidance on shared parental leave, because it is a really useful guidance and hopefully it'll point you in the right direction also if you have any problems. And the Department for Business and Skills, they have created a question and answer document on shared parental leave and pay, which is quite an in-depth document, and on that document there's some very detailed question and answers which hopefully will tidy up any queries you may have. So with shared parental leave, it is a new type of leave arrangement, and it's based on the mother's entitlement to 52 weeks maternity or adoption leave, and it's to be taken during the child's first year. So there's the sort of key things to have a think about. But what I'll be doing through this webinar is chatting through each sort of element, eligibility criteria, and how employees go about requesting it. The other main thing to have a think about is it only applies to employees. So it's only employees who can take a benefit of shared parental leave. So if you've got workers or self-employed, they won't be eligible for this type of leave arrangement. So if you just look at the next slide, that's just a quick summary of what this webinar is all about. So what is shared parental leave? What happens with maternity, paternity and adoption leave? We're going to look at the eligibility criteria for shared parental leave, because it's really important that you understand that. Just so you're aware what employees you have who will qualify for that. Also what happens with shared parental pay, the process of booking shared parental leave, and just rounding off with some steps for employers. Before I really get into it, what we're going to do first of all is do a quick poll. And I'd be really interested to see if any of you have had any requests yet for shared parental leave. It just be really interesting, I think, for all of us to understand if anybody has received requests from employees at present for shared parental leave and how you're dealing with those requests. So we're just putting a poll up at the moment. So I'll just pause for a minute whilst you have a look at that poll, and if you can fill anything in, that'd be appreciated. Okay, thanks for completing that poll. I can see actually the majority of you haven't yet had any requests, but I think a few of you actually have. It'd be interesting to hear if you are able to share on the chat feed any issues you've had with those requests, or if they've been quite straightforward, just to give us a bit of an understanding really, and then I can share that with everybody. So if you are able to provide any details about the request, that'd be good. Otherwise, what I'll just do for the time being then is crack on, and then we can have a look at it again in a bit and see if any of you are able to provide feedback. So if we have a look at the next slide then, so shared parental leave then, what are we talking about? So it's a new legal entitlement that came into force on the 1st of December 2014, but only started to apply to babies due or children placed for adoption on or after the 5th of April 2015. That's probably why now a few of you may have started to receive some requests. Now the sort of premise of shared parental leave is it provides both parents, if they are eligible, with the opportunity to consider the best arrangement to care for their child during the child's first year. So it allows this sort of flexible sharing of care arrangements really, which may be a bonus to some parents in looking at caring for the child during the first year. The leave is calculated using the mother's entitlement to maternity or adoption leave, so it's based on the 52 weeks entitlement. Now the good thing about shared parental leave, and why this may be useful for many parents if they are eligible for it, is they can stop and start shared parental leave. So when you compare that to maternity leave and adoption leave, once you return to work from maternity leave, that's it, you're back at work. You can't then take another period of maternity leave. So you're either on maternity leave or you're not. With shared parental leave, it's very different. So you can actually go on shared parental leave for a month, say, return to work for a month, and then take shared parental leave again for a month. And I think the reason why this may work for some employees is those that maybe benefit from being at work for a certain period during the year. So say, for instance, at Christmas time, if they're entitled to a bonus or they get extra overtime, it may be more beneficial for them to stop the maternity leave, bring that to an end, opt into shared parental leave, and then take a period of shared parental leave, but then return to work during that period where they're able to gain a bit more money, and maybe make them a bit more financially secure. So that's one of the main benefits really to it. Shared parental leave did replace what was called additional paternity leave. I'm not sure if any of you ever had requests for this, but before the 5th of April 2015, with paternity leave, the fathers had the statutory right to ordinary paternity leave, but then they could take what was called additional paternity leave, which was 26 weeks leave. But that was based on the mother's entitlement to maternity leave. And so for that to take effect, the mother had to return to work, and then the father then took the additional leave. So it didn't really allow any flexibility, so I'm not sure anybody really ever took that up. So that's now been abolished. So going forward for babies due on or after the 5th of April, we're now looking at shared parental leave instead. So that's just a bit of an understanding to it. And then we'll move on now to look at the types of leave that can be requested, because it's really important as an employer that you understand the differences between these requests. So continuous leave. This is a period of leave that is taken in one block. So the employee makes a request for one block. So it's either 4 weeks or a block of 3 months. And it's done in one block, and that type of leave can never be refused by an employer. So it's really important that you understand that if you get a request for shared parental leave and they ask for one continuous leave block, you have to accept it. There's no sort of room for movement there. However, if the employee makes a request for discontinuous leave, so this is a period of leave that is arranged around weeks where the employee will return to work. So for example, they work every other week for a period of 3 months, so they stop and start it. Then this type of leave, you do have to agree. So there is a bit more flexibility there. So if you cannot accommodate this in your business, then that's fine. You are able to refuse that leave.
We have a question here from Sherry. If you want to read it out.
I'll just stop for one moment because we've had a couple of questions. I've had one say, what is the risk to a business if a period of continuous leave is not accepted? Well, the risk to the business is because it has to be accepted, you may end up with a claim. If they're not going to, if you're not allowing them to take the shared parental leave as requested, and if they're eligible, then it's, a potential discrimination claim. They're not being allowed to take a statutory period of leave. So unfortunately, for businesses, this is, I'll talk about this more at the end about having a policy and having discussions with your employees at early stages. But my advice to any employer now, once you're notified that your employee is pregnant, or if it's the father that works for you, it would always be best to have early discussions with your employees about their intentions so that you can maybe look to see what can be accommodated. But the risk is obviously on the continuous leave, it has to be accepted. So if it isn't, then that is a serious risk to the business. That's right. I think... Yeah, it'd be under the Equality Act because it's a statutory right, is this leave. So the employees, if they are eligible and they qualify for it, it's a statutory right. It's a bit like maternity, leave. And if you just think about it along the same lines as maternity leave and adoption leave, it runs in exactly the same way. The statutory entitled to have this leave. So if you refuse it, then obviously they've got a statutory claim against you. So in the same way, you've got a pregnant employee, you don't allow her to have maternity leave. Well, she qualifies for it. She qualifies for it. So if you just think about it along those lines, I think you can't go too wrong. So just moving back to the slides then, with the discontinuous leave, like I say, that gives you a bit more flexibility, so you can reject that, because often some companies may simply not be able to accommodate it because they might not have the cover in place to be able to do that. So that does give you a bit more flexibility. The leave must be taken in complete weeks, so it can't be the odd days here and there, which I think obviously helps to accommodate businesses. So it has to be taken in a complete week. It can just be 1 week, but it could be obviously for a bit longer period. Right, we'll move on to the next slide. Right, so just to cover off maternity, paternity and adoption leave. So what happens with this? Well, this just continues as normal. So obviously, if you're eligible for maternity leave, that continues. So does paternity leave and so does adoption leave. So as we said before, maternity and adoption leave, it's 52 weeks. For paternity, for the ordinary paternity leave, it's 1 or 2 weeks. So that continues as normal. But if the eligible mother or adopter wants to opt into shared parental leave, then they must reduce their entitlement to maternity or adoption leave. So they must bring that to an end in order for shared parental leave to take effect. Interestingly, also on the maternity leave, there is compulsory maternity leave. So whilst there's 52 weeks available, a birth mother must take at least 2 weeks maternity leave, and if she works in a factory, she must take at least 4 weeks. So there's a number of weeks compulsory leave that she must take, which means the remaining weeks are then available to have on shared parental leave. So if they have to take 2 weeks maternity leave, there's then 50 weeks available really for parents to look at, sharing that type of leave if they're both eligible. But the key thing for shared parental leave is that the maternity leave must be brought to an end, so they must have either given notice to bring it to an end or it must have ended in order for the shared parental leave to start to take effect. Hi, Cherry. I think you've just sent me a few questions on this discrimination and the continuous leave. I can come back to you in a bit about that if that's okay. I think you're asking me about a loophole query. I mean, if you want to provide me with some more information, I can have a look at that for you, or you can send me an email directly. My details will be at the end. But like I say, it's a statutory leave request, and I think, as I said earlier, if you just treat it in the same manner you would maternity leave, if the employees qualify and are eligible for it and they opt into it, then you have to make sure you follow the process, correctly, unfortunately, for some employers. Right, so we'll start looking at the eligibility, because this might give you a bit more information and idea of the process. So for a mother to trigger the right to shared parental leave for one or both of the parents, she must have a partner. So that can be the child's biological father or partner of the mother or adopter, or it can be a spouse, civil partner, or a partner who's living in an enduring relationship with the mother and the child. So there has to be a partner there. They have to be entitled to either maternity or adoption leave, or statutory maternity pay or statutory adoption pay or maternity allowance. And they have to have given notice to reduce this. So that's obviously the key to shared parental leave, is that that notice has to have been given for it to have been reduced. I've just got one more question that's just popped up. How much notice would you expect the mother to give to end mat leave? I think generally the way it's running at the moment, it seems to be 8 weeks seems to be the key, really. You always appear to get 8 weeks notice. So you get 8 weeks notice of the entitlement shared parental leave. You get 8 weeks notice if they want to book any leave. So I'd use that as a guideline, really, that it should be 8 weeks. Yeah, so that's the first thing. So the first thing to look at is this eligibility for the mother. So you've got to look at that first of all. And then the next bit is then the bit where it becomes a little bit more complicated. So the parent who wants to take shared parental leave, so the person who's wishing to opt in and take this, they have to be an employee, as I said at the start, eligible for employees only. They have to share the primary responsibility for the child with the other parent at the time of the birth or adoption placement. And they also have to notify their employer of their entitlements. This is the 8 weeks. They've got to 8 weeks period to notify, and they've got to provide all the correct information. Now, it's quite detailed, the information that they must provide their employer, and this is probably why it's quite crucial, really, for you to have a look at the ACAS guidance, because in the appendix, I think it's Appendix 1, it sets out all the information that must be provided by your employee to you, by the employee wishing to take this shared parental leave and wishing to provide notice of entitlement. Just basically, it covers things like, this is just briefly what the notice covers, but it's things like names of the mother and partner, start and end date of any statutory maternity or adoption leave, the total amount of shared parental leave available, and how much leave both the mother and partner intend to take. And as well as that, the employee has to provide a declaration to you. And in addition to that, they have to provide you with a declaration from their partner. So you get quite a lot of information from them, really, and it's up to the employee to check that they are eligible, and it's up to the employee to make sure they provide you with all the correct information that you're meant to be entitled to receive under the legislation. So from my point of view, I don't know what you think of it, but it seems to me to be quite a complex process, and I wonder whether that's why there hasn't been that much uptake on it so far. Some of the clients I act for to date, they haven't had any requests yet. They're geared up towards it. They've looked at implementing policies and things like that, but to date, they haven't yet received any requests, and I wonder whether it's just because the process itself may be a bit too complicated for employees. I don't know what your thoughts are. Whether you want to put anything in the chat box as to what your viewpoints are when you've been having a look at it. But I just wonder whether the sort of notice requirements, whether they're just a bit too much in depth, and whether people are just going to tend to stick with the maternity leave and the current provisions that are already in place. But we'll see anyway, won't we, as we keep going through it. But like I say, that's the first point of call. So the parent intending to take shared parental leave must meet these criteria and must provide all that information. And then in addition to that, this is where it gets a bit more complicated. In addition to that, the parent who wants to take the shared parental leave must meet this test. So I've put this test on the slide, so at least you've got it there as a reference point. So they must meet the continuity of employment test. And as it says there, they've got to have worked for the same employer for at least 26 weeks at the end of the 15th week before the due date and still be working for the same employer at the start of each leave period. And then in addition to that, their partner must meet this employment and earnings test. And again, I've put that on the slide so it's clear. And that says in the 66 weeks leading up to the expected due date or matching date, must have worked for at least 26 weeks and earned on average of at least £30 as of 2015 a week in any 13 weeks. So the quite in-depth tests that really have to be met there. I'm just going to have a look at the chat box. I think we've had a few comments put up. Yeah, I think Emma's just said it does appear to be very confusing and complicated. I think this is off-putting for employees. I would tend to agree with that. I've got another person who said they've put together a frequently asked questions guide in case they have anything going forward, but it does appear very confusing. Yes, I mean, I agree with that, and I think, I mean, we're going to do a poll at the end. I mean, we could do it now, actually. We're going to do another poll, and we could actually do it now. It might be a good time to do it to see if any of you have actually implemented a shared parental leave policy. And because to be honest with you, it's one of the things I would recommend because I think it is a very confusing process, and I think if you have a policy in place that clearly sets out what the entitlement is, what the notification requirements are, if you actually have that written down as a reference point for both yourself and your employees, you may find it becomes a bit easier. So what I'll do is I'll just pause for a minute, and then you can have an answer of the poll, and then let me know whether you've got one in place or not. Okay, well, thank you for that. So we've had a few responses. So we've got, well, about quite a lot of you actually have implemented one, which I think is quite positive. And hopefully, when you do get your requests in, it should help, you know, your HR departments or the managers be able to respond to those effectively. And also, it should help the employees maybe understand a bit better what they need to do and the process they need to follow. So hopefully, going forward for companies, it will be a positive process if you do get requests. So just back to the slides then. So yes, this eligibility, so like I say, they just need to obviously meet these tests, and it's for the employee to make sure they're eligible. So the employee obviously has to work this out. But what will happen, as I've put on the bottom there, is sometimes only one parent will be eligible because obviously it's only employees that are eligible for shared parental leave. So for example, a self-employed parent will not be eligible, but they may still pass that employment and earnings test. And if they do, then their partner, if they are an employee, will still qualify. So even if their partner is only self-employed, they're more than likely going to meet that employment and earnings test because it's quite a low test. And then they could pass the eligibility then back to the partner who is an employee, and they will then qualify for it. So it's just a bit different way of looking at it. And also, you may get that both parents qualify, so both parents may be employees and both parents may qualify for it. And then what they will have to do is decide between them how they want to share the leave. They'll have to decide, does the mother want to bring to an end her maternity leave? Do we both want to opt into shared parental leave? And how do we divide the leave entitlement? And what do we do with that? And remember, they can both be off at the same time on shared parental leave. So that's the other bonus of it, is they can both opt into it and then put the notice in for booking requests and be off at the same time as well. So it's a different way of sharing and caring for your children, really. Right, so then shared parental pay, pretty much as similar as the other bits I've just been talking about. It's the same test. So to qualify, the employee must meet that continuity of employment test that we talked about on the last slide, and their partner, again, must meet that employment and earnings test. And in addition, the employee must have earned above the lower earnings limit in the 8 weeks leading up to the 15th week before the due date. Currently, the lower earnings limit is £112, so I think most people will qualify for that. And they've still got to be employed by the same employer at the start of the first period of shared parental pay. So that's just something on the parental pay there that they'll just have to bear in mind. I think someone's just put up there a comment to say it would make sense that the highest earner goes back to work. Yes, I would agree with that, unless obviously they get enhanced pay. So some companies, I mean, it depends which company they work for, doesn't it? But some companies on the maternity policy may offer enhanced maternity pay. So obviously they may not want to bring it to an end if they get enhanced maternity pay for 6 months. But then what they might want to do is take advantage of the full pay for 6 months. And then when it goes to statutory pay, then opt into shared parental leave and then pass the rest of the leave to the partner, and then they go back to work. So yeah, it's a different type of flexible arrangement, and I think obviously it's one for parents to sit down and decide, which works best for them. So the process, so then again, is shared parental leave suitable? So as I've been saying all along, it's really for employees to decide, isn't it, whether it would suit them. So whether both parents qualify and how would they like to share the leave, whether the mother actually wants to bring her maternity leave or adoption leave to an end. Does she actually really want to go back to work sooner, or does she want to bring it to an end? And also to consider whether there's any contractual entitlement to enhanced pay, because obviously if there is, then that might determine whether they opt into shared parental leave or not. Right, then the notice, so the process really. So to start the process, as we've said before, the mother has to notify that she wants to bring to an end her maternity leave or adoption leave, and then this notice of entitlement has to be sent in by the parent wishing to take the leave. So it's got to be sent in 8 weeks before they intend to take the leave, and there's just a bit on there about what that covers, which we've talked about before, and as I said, it's set out in the ACAS guidance at Appendix 1, 2. And then a declaration also has to be provided, as we talked about before. So all that information has to be given to the employer 8 weeks before. Now, what happens if parents change their minds? So what happens if they send all this notice in and then they think, well, hang on a minute, I don't want to I don't want to do shared parental leave anymore, I don't want to opt into it. Now, there's only very restricted circumstances can a mother or a partner change their mind on shared parental leave, i.e., say I don't want to do it anymore. So once a mother has given notice to end her maternity leave or adoption leave, and either parent has informed their employer that they're entitled to it, so they've sent that notice of entitlement in, then it's binding. So the opt-in is binding and it can't be withdrawn unless the notice was given before birth. So notice of shared parental leave entitlement was given before birth. It may be withdrawn up to 6 weeks following the birth, which I think is sensible because often, after you've given birth, mothers may change their mind about how they want to share the leave or what they want to do. It can be opted out of if the mother's partner dies, because obviously, unfortunately, then they won't meet the qualifying criteria. Or within 8 weeks of submitting the notice to end the maternity leave or adoption leave, it actually transpires that neither partner qualifies for shared parental leave. So they're the only sort of scenarios in which the opt-out can be changed. So once you've opted into it, you've opted into it really. In terms of the actual notice of entitlement, in terms of the booking leave, so if you've given notice of entitlement and you've said I want to have this type of leave on these dates for this period, if you wish to vary that, you can do that. So a parent who wants to vary the timing of the leave and wants to make a few changes can do that, but they just need to write to their employer to advise of that. So that's another option to them. And then just finally on the process really, just looking at booking the leave. So the leave can be booked at the same time as the notification is sent, or you can send the notification in and then book the leave separately, but you've still got to give it 8 weeks notice. It's always 8 weeks that you get. And the employers get 3 separate notices to book leave. They're only entitled to submit 3 separate notices. So what you may find if you have an employee making this request is they'll use one notice to book all the leave. So on one notice they'll set it out how they want the leave to be booked over the next year, and then they'll keep 2 notices spared just in case they need to vary it or change it, because if they want to vary it, they use up another notice. You can, as employers, allow more notices to book leave, or you can just keep it at 3. It's completely up to you. 3 is the statutory minimum. So they go about booking the leave and they set it all out. And then obviously on your employer's response, we're back to the beginning here. So what type of leave is being requested? Continuous or discontinuous? If it's continuous, must be agreed. If it's just discontinuous leave, so it's where they're saying, I want to work for a week, go off on shared parental leave for a week, come back to work, so it's stop and starting it. You can refuse this if you legitimately cannot accommodate it. But what the sort of guidelines say is, look, speak to your employees over 14 days, discuss it with them. See if you can accept it. Can you accommodate it? Or could you accommodate it with some modifications? If it was slightly changed, would you be able to modify it and agree it then? If you can, perfect. If you cannot at all accommodate it because it just doesn't work for your business, then the employee can withdraw the request and put in another request. So withdraw that request because you can't accommodate it and submit another notice. But if the problem is if the employee doesn't withdraw it, then what happens is that period of discontinuous leave converts to a continuous leave period, and then it's taken as one lump leave. So when you're talking to your employees about it, and if they put a request in for discontinuous leave, make sure you talk to them about this provision. You know, if you genuinely cannot accommodate it, tell them to withdraw it, because otherwise it'll convert to a period of continuous leave, and then you're faced with them being off on a one lump period, which might not be what you want, and it might not be what the employee wants either. I mean, really, the whole key for this sort of shared parental leave thing is to really talk to your employees about it. So once you're notified of an employee's pregnancy, or notified that, you know, if you have the father working for you that their partner's expecting, sit down with them, sort of talk to them about their leave intentions, and maybe make them aware that this is available if it's something that they, you know, fit the criteria for and are eligible for. This is something they might want to consider. And what you could say to them is, look, go away, have a think about it. If you do want to consider it, come and chat informally to me, tell me what you're thinking. And what you could then do is maybe see if you could agree it prior to them putting the formal notices in. And then once the formal notices go in, it doesn't come as a surprise to you, and then it works out better for you. So my advice would always be to have those sort of discussions early on with your employees, see what's going on, and see whether you can help out and accommodate on this. And then just rounding up then, just some real tips really for employers on this. Like I said, discuss your leave intentions with your staff, talk to them about it. It is the employee's responsibility to check that they are eligible for shared parental leave. So it is for them to fill out the notice of entitlement, send you the declarations. Obviously, you can check that the information is correct, and you will get a declaration from their partner to say that they meet the criteria. And you can ask for the partner's employer's details as well, so you can make inquiries with them if you have concerns. But all I would say is obviously act proportionally there and treat everybody the same. So if you make inquiries with one person, make sure you always make inquiries, that you're not treating people differently. But generally, it is the employee's responsibility to check their eligibility. Shared parental leave policy, as I said earlier on, I would really recommend having one of these in place, and it appears that a few of you have got this in place, which I think is really positive. And you know, it's good to include in that how employees inform you of their entitlement to shared parental leave, how notice to book leave will be handled, where they can find the forms, you know, whether it's online or whether you have your own forms to book the leave, and also how you will handle a notice to book leave, what the process is that you will follow, and also the different types of leave they can request, like the continuous leave or discontinuous leave, and how that will be handled. So you can really clearly set out in a policy, which will hopefully be a useful tool for everybody going forward. And then just some final points really. Annual leave, exactly the same as maternity leave and adoption leave, it just continues to accrue. So if they're on shared parental leave, it'll just continue to accrue in the normal way, so just be aware of that. And then split days, these are a bit like the keeping in touch days on maternity leave. So each partner, if they're eligible, can have 20 days each. So these are the days where they can just come in, you know, for training or for updates, and come in and actually, you know, work in the office for a day without bringing the shared parental leave to an end. So that's just something to bear in mind, that you can use those and take use of those if that helps your business as well. And then I think that is generally it really. So I don't know if any of you have any questions at all on this process, or if you've got any queries going on at the moment, if any of your employees have been in contact with you with queries on this and you want to have a chat with me about them. Oh, so yeah, is the 20 split day? Oh, sorry, the one above it. How does the pay work if they opt for discontinuous leave? So if they opt for discontinuous leave, then obviously the days that if they're on shared parental leave for a week, if they're entitled to shared parental pay, they'll be paid that. But when they return back to work, they'll be paid as normal. So you'll have to. It's going to be a bit of a nightmare, I think, unfortunately, for payroll. I think the payroll departments are probably going to suffer the most out of this in trying to work out who's on what pay, when. And obviously, if both parents qualify and they're sharing the leave, they'll also have to share the parental pay if they both qualify for that. So employers are going to have to talk to each other on this, and payroll departments are probably going to have to talk to each other to make sure that payments are being made correctly. Other question, is the 20 split days in addition to the 10 kit days for the mother? Yes, in addition. So they'll have the entitlement during the maternity leave, and then once that's brought to an end, and if they opt into the shared parental leave, then they'll have that entitlement to those other days as well. I mean, on the sort of split days, I think it's the same with the kit days as well. There's no actual obligation on the employer to offer these or for the employee to agree to them. They're there as sort of a buffer, really, and for some companies they just offer them anyway as a matter of course. In the policies it says, for maternity leave you're entitled to 10 kit days. In the shared parental leave policy it'll say the same, 20. But it's obviously a room to negotiate and have a chat with, and you may not be able to accommodate 20 days, and you may not even need to, because it may not be the type of organisation where you need people to come in for training and things like that. So just have a think about it, what works best for your organisation. I've got a question. Does anyone currently offer enhanced pay for shared parental pay? I do know one company that's offering enhanced shared parental pay. What they've done is they've mirrored the policy to the maternity leave, adoption leave and paternity policies. So they've made it all the same. So there's no issue there. No one, it's not off-putting for anybody. Basically, they've mirrored it. So yes, I do know of one company at the moment that is offering that enhanced pay. And somebody else has said yes, they do. And then yes, but only if they take the 7th and 8th weeks in line with our maternity policy. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, so I mean, it'd be interesting to see what happens going forward. And I think obviously it is a very new concept. I do think people are still trying to get their heads around it, especially employees are trying to get their heads around the notice provisions and the eligibility criteria. And I think maybe as we move forward into the next year, possibly you may start to see more requests coming in. So I think obviously at this stage, it's just a case of, like I say, downloading the ACAS guidance, read that through, because it's a really good guidance, and the Department for Business and Innovation Skills, have a look at that, and just get your policies in place and just get ready. And then when a request does come in, you're not put off course by it. It's not something that's come out of the blue. You can handle it properly and have proper conversations with your employee about it. My contact details are there at the end, so if after this webinar you want to get in touch with me directly, not a problem, just drop me an email. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And as Liz said, the slides will be available anyway, so you can take those away, and we'll also have a Q&A document that I prepared for the last webinar, so hopefully that might be of use to you as well. But I think that's it for now. So thank you ever so much for attending. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline, and thanks everybody for joining in the conversation today. There's a lot of questions there that came through, and like Caroline said, we will be sending out an email by the end of the week with all the bits and pieces we've talked about. Some contact details will be on the slides as well, but by all means connect with myself or Caroline on LinkedIn or send us an email. There's some information there with regards to where you can access the slides and all the slides from historic webinars as well, whether it's on LinkedIn, SlideShare, YouTube. We try and make all our content as available as possible, so please jump in and access sort of past and previous stuff from there as well. And just before I leave, a couple of things there. We are running a virtual HR breakfast club, and that's on the second Tuesday of most months, and that's at 8:30 in the morning. So hopefully you would have got those details on the email that we sent through, and for some reason I can't seem to get there we go. And finally, next week we have Joanne Vose coming in to talk to us about competence interviews. So there'll be a lot being covered on competency-based interviews, and that's on the 23rd of June. And then the week after, we will be talking workplace mediation, what it is and how it works. So that should be quite an interesting one. So join us again then. Thank you ever so much for your comments and kind comments there. Thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you again in the not-too-distant future. Take care.